Okay, so I've been wanting to talk about a lot of things for a very long time and have struggled because every time I try to, it becomes very convoluted. Um, and I've realized over time that that's largely in part to the fact that every time I started talking about these things, I would get in my emotions, get stressed, and then would start kind of the way that I would communicate the things would be in the vein of like calling people out. And that's not what I'm trying to do. So I've struggled with that. And I've done a lot of healing work in order to come to a place where that isn't my focus is on calling people out. That isn't my responsibility. I'm not trying to get revenge on anyone. Like, I don't hold hate and bitterness in my heart if I can help it. And all of this is part of the process of releasing those things, communicating my truth, letting people know what I've been through, who I am, because that's me, and that's all that I need to worry about. I don't need to focus on what it is that other people should have done or should be doing or any of that jazz. So um, I hope that you can keep that in mind as I discuss these things, because as healed as I've become, there's still triggers, and ways that I tend to communicate things from emotion rather than like logic. Um, and hopefully you can, just take things for what they're worth and leave whatever you can recognize as pure opinion behind. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, I'm going to have my own bias because I'm the one that experienced certain things, but at the same time, I don't want to cater to my bias. I want to try to express things in as like normal, valid of a way as possible. Um, so, okay, so that's where I'm at. So, there's so much that I have involved myself in and with that I am not proud of. Um, but those things, there's a lot of things that people do that they can feel that way about that, like, people don't need to know about. As long as you move on, that's great. As long as you grow from it and stuff like that, like, then it's fine. But a lot of the things that I have involved myself with have just affected me very deeply. They became very entrenched in my identity for a long time. And the person that people have come to know now is much different. But like even just 2 years ago, the person that people had come to know was very much the consequence and the accumulation of those experiences and choices. And as much as I mean, 2 years ago, people could look at my healing process and pretty much call me a hypocrite for all of it because I wasn't in an active, my lifestyle didn't reflect that healing yet. I hadn't practiced those things long enough for them to become habit to the point where now that's just part of who I am. Back then, it was just like a general awareness of certain things. And so as I started to express a concept of healing and education through my experiences, I was still very much entrenched in those things. Um, and it has taken a long time and a lot of work and so many messed up experiences for me to be able to come to a clear sense of mind about them. Um, I have definitely been some places I did not belong. Nobody should be in those places, but at the same time, I mean, this is me. This is my story. Everything that I've been through, I went through for a reason. The reason used to be because I wasn't self aware and was acting selfishly and was running from my problems. Um, but who I am today can be thankful for that person because that's who led me to where I am today. But I don't want to talk in a way that like I'm so holy now. Like I'm somehow separate from who I've ever been. I am the cultivation of, the accumulation of, the consequence of all of those things. Still, I just do better with it now. I at least actively try to. By no means am I perfect. By no means am I even ideal to myself. But at the same time, like I really am. I'm so proud of myself for like where I've come and what I've gone through and how I handled those things. And the older I get and the more I can look back on these things, the more I don't see myself as a victim. I see myself as somebody actively putting myself through certain experiences because I needed to learn from them. I wasn't fully aware of that at the time, but I'm thankful to be where I'm at now. Still, I think that it's very important that I talk about a lot of these things, not just from my personal experience, but because of what I've found they reflect in the grander reality. Um, because there are things I've been involved with that are systematic, that are uh, prevalent in our entire community, not just even in a first world society, but in the world at large, universally, even over time and throughout history. And so it's like my experiences have really like educated me on so many of these things and the interconnectedness of so many of these things. And when I speak on these things, I want to be able to do it in a way that gives way to that grander experience. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to be talking from a personal point, but these things speak on much larger, more universal issues. Sorry, I'm not, my hair looks so, this is what I look like. Okay. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, the thing that's been on my heart the most as of late, as of this entire year, has been my family estrangement. I have been essentially estranged from my family for the last, I've been slowly becoming more and more estranged from them my entire adult life. But particularly in the last 7 years. Um, and progressively throughout that period of time. Um, at the same time, like especially even this year, I've been able to reflect on a lot of the healing and gone back and been able to resolve different issues that I had so that I'm no longer running from those things, which was causing so much of the estrangement. I'm actively setting healthier boundaries. I'm pursuing relationships that actually do benefit me. I cannot handle what my hair looks like right now. Um, and uh, just I've gone through these things so that they're no longer like a point of constant pain and triggering for the most part. Still learning, still going through it. How is this better? Anyways, sorry. This is not about my appearance. Okay. So I haven't known where to start with this because I've always tried to keep going back to the issues that I had in childhood and what led to those things and why I had these feelings. But I think it's best that I just start from where I started to realize that I had an issue in the first place. When I was 20, well, I guess, okay, so when I was 19 was like the peak of my sex addiction. And I had a boss who cared for me. And she pulled me aside one day and had a very heart to heart discussion with me about her concerns for my addiction, which I at the time was not aware of, or at least not privy to, as in denial of it. And she brought it up to me and recommended some literature and 12-step program for it. It was something that she had dealt with. She had also been a heroin addict. And so she was like, I get it. I understand, and I've been sober now for 14 years. I think the sex addiction had kind of taken a little, like she hadn't been sober from that for as long. Um, but she was like, it's something that, I don't think is very common amongst women. It's not something that a lot of people talk about, but I can see that it's something that you're struggling with. And, I hope that you don't take offense to me recognizing these things or saying these things. But like, if it's something that you recognize that you are struggling with and that you want care for, there are resources for that. And all of it was so incredibly kind. She was such an incredibly just passionate and compassionate person. So it reflected well when she had that talk with me, and I did receive it, and I did end up going to a 12-step program, and it did change my life. I'll be in recovery, I assume, my whole life. It was an extremely uh, like significant part of my identity. Um, Basically my entire life. My entire childhood, my teen years, and then going up into my adult life. And then like even, I went to the 12-step program, and then I ended up getting married. I'd convinced myself that monogamy, trading sobriety for monogamy was fine, that would be a healthy alternative. Um, at the time I was also running for my family, but I didn't fully know why. I moved out of my parents' house 6 months after dating this dude. It was the first time I had moved out of my parents' house, and I was 20, I believe, and yeah, I was 20, and yeah, 2020, maybe I was 21. I guess I was 21. Crazy. It took that long for me to move out of my parents' house, and I was going through so many issues. The couple years prior, the leading years prior, there was so much. There's so much I can talk about and get into, but I want to try to make this fluid because there's one specific thing I want to talk about. So I started to separate from my family at that point, and at the time, it kind of just felt like it was because I was just trying to stretch my wings out. Like I'd been living with my parents until I was 20, 21, and wanted to experience my own life, and had been raised to be a housewife, and so marrying in order to get out of that situation seemed not just like the better option. It seemed like the inevitable, not the inevitable, my responsibility almost. Like I never considered to have an independent life by any means. The concept was that it was sinful for me as a woman to live independently, that the point was that I was supposed to go directly from under my parents' care into the care of my husband's. Looking back on all of that, like it's so crazy how far removed I am from those concepts now. But so that's what I did, and the marriage wasn't healthy. The relationship was not at all healthy. It was for either of us. We were both just using each other to cope, and we weren't doing a good job of it. We didn't truly care for each other like we needed. We were both very selfish and short-sighted, and it reflected in the relationship. But I did at that time, it was the first time I was away from my family, and I savored that in a way that I hadn't expected. I didn't understand fully why. Again, I just thought that it was because it was kind of my first taste of some sense of freedom or individuality. Um, and I put all my energy into trying to be as good of a wife as possible and trying to fit that role, and, sacrificing my identity for the sake of being this man's partner. All of that's terribly unhealthy, but that's what I was doing. And when our relationship started to break down, now I'd been estranging myself from my family at that point to a bit, like I said, to claim some sense of independence, but from them. But I had no sense of independence within my relationship. And my husband was very jealous of any of the time I did spend with my family. Now, I know now that's because he wanted to be a part of those things, but didn't feel properly received by my family. And I don't blame him. They didn't respect him or care for him. Um, they didn't respect or care for me, but they were my, they were, I grew up with my brothers being my best friends, and my family being everything. I was super sheltered to the point that like I cared more about my family, or cared more to spend my time with my family, than I did even friends. I didn't really have friends because my friends were chosen for me. Um, and I didn't like them. So I liked my family more than I liked my friends. And, the times that I did have friends that I chose for myself, I was generally kept from them because they were considered bad influences. So I spent most of my time with my family. And then when I got married, I would continue, like, that's how I spent my free time, was I would go and hang out with my brothers. And my husband was jealous of that. And as our relationship started to break down, I started kind of using my family as then my independence from the relationship. It was all so toxically codependent. And I didn't understand any of those things. I didn't know those terms. I didn't know what any of that stuff was. I didn't understand that things were toxic. I didn't know. I was just living my life, just day to day, just trying to make the most, was my motto. Just make the most of whatever you're given. And so it was just, I was trapped. And once we separated, I moved out of I moved out of the apartment and moved into my car with my dog. I pretty much left everything with my ex-husband. Just took what I could fit in the car, what was mine or whatever. But like, obviously he kept everything else. And I did that as like, everything. I ended up paying for the divorce twice because he spent the first money I sent him to do it. And uh, I was just very much in like kind of like a victim mentality, I guess, where, you know, I'll just give you everything and I'll figure it out. I'll start new. That's what I wanted to do anyways, because all of the reminders of everything was painful. At the same time, I had started to do cocaine with my brothers and their friends on occasion, maybe twice a year. We would spend the weekend just doing tons of blow, um, and that was always fine. It never seemed to be a problem because I was only doing it every so often, and would feel like shit after the weekend was over. So I didn't even want to do it again until we all got together to do it again. But I had picked up the concept of the habit at that time. So I had friends. One of my close friends actually was a dealer. So like I had friends that did it. I would do it on occasion with him or with our friends, um, but that was very rare. And once I separated from my husband, then I kind of had this freedom. Well, plus I was living out of my car, so then I like was met with and I didn't tell my family at the time that was what was going on. I didn't tell anybody that that's what was going on. I was managing a dog daycare, which was run by my ex-husband's best friend's family. So I didn't tell any of them what was going on. I felt like that was his place and that I wasn't going to try to take that from him. That was his best friend's family. So when he was ready to tell them what was going on between us, I let him do that. So I just kept quiet and just kept working while I was living out of my car. And I ended up quitting that job. I was also working at the time at Ralph Lauren, which I had worked there for years already. And I quit the job at the daycare because it just became way too much. I couldn't keep up the ruse. I couldn't keep lying about it. I wanted to tell these people what was going on so that they understood, but I didn't feel like it was my place. I also, it was a lot harder for me to care for my dog out of the car with all of that going on. Where at Ralph Lauren, I was able to talk to my managers, let them know what was going on. They could tell I was going through a hard time. They knew I was living out of my car, so they made a lot of leniencies for me and allowances, and being able to like go out every couple of hours and take my dog for a little walk and stuff like that. Um, so I was managing that for a while, but at the same time, I started the only like way, and that was the codependency. The only I struggled to be alone. So I was spending time with my friends who did cocaine and my friend that was a dealer. And I started just spending all of my money on cocaine. I would eat a little bit throughout the week. I've always made sure that my dog was cared for. But I didn't really care about myself. So I would forego eating most of the time to pay for cigarettes. And, I would pay for pot. I was smoking pot and I was doing cocaine. It got to the point where uh, I'm already taking too much time to talk about this, but like, okay, so then I can get into these things in another time, but I'm really trying to talk about something completely different. Um, So yeah, I was having a hard time at that point, living out of my car. By the time that my parents realized that I was living out of my car, they insisted that I come live back with them. I had been very stubborn about not wanting to ever live with my parents again, but I didn't know what else to do with myself, and I couldn't resist them at the time because I didn't know how to speak up for myself, and I didn't understand what I was feeling or why I was so resistant about having a relationship with them. So I just fell back into it and I just moved back into their house. But I was immediately incredibly depressed, even more so than I had already been. Uh, I had stopped doing cocaine, but I was just not well. And when I hit rock bottom at that point, I did what I do when I get in my lows, and I just amped up all that energy and phoenixed my way out of the shit, right? I started selling all of my things and getting rid of all of my things and making plans to go on the road. I had come up with this concept back when I was like 18 about living in the road. At first, I wanted to do van life, but I couldn't afford a van at this point. So I was like, you don't really need a van. You just need a vehicle so that you can get where you need to go. And, you learn as you go. You live off of whatever skills you have. You learn more skills. You trade. You offer, whatever you have in order to make a living. And I believed in myself at the time. It's not even that I believed in myself. I just didn't believe in like what I had, and I was like, well, I kind of had a death wish, to be honest, for sure. See, even when I get into this in a deeper way, like it'll make everything so much clearer, but I was not in a good mental state at all. I was extremely depressed. I definitely had a death wish. I've had suicidal ideation since I was a child, but there's been different times where it's been a lot more severe. And this was one of them. And the way I was coping with that was kind of just to cut out my emotions and just to focus on what I could do to survive. Um, I did not feel like I could survive at my parents' house. Yes, they were giving me a roof over my head and they weren't charging me rent for it. But being around them and dealing with the toxic relationship that I had with them was far too much. It was way too heavy for me. Um, so I set out to go on the road. And at this point, I'm 24. And my stepdad at one point was like, okay, it's obvious that you're leaving and that we can't stop you. You're a grown adult, but we really want you to reconsider doing this alone. You shouldn't be a woman out on the road by yourself. It's so unsafe. So many bad things can happen. We really wish that you would find a man to be there with you. And so in my smart assness, I suppose, or my ignorance, I just went on Facebook and started making posts about what my intents were and what I was looking for and how I needed a partner, was looking for a partner to pursue it with me. This random dude hit me up and started sending me messages, and he about it, and he seemed like we were on the same page about things. We had the same goals, a lot of the same interests, same skills even. So it really felt like, okay, we're going to learn each other. We're going to learn ourselves. We're going to learn this process. We're going to do it all together. Like, okay, I've never had a problem jumping into things. I've learned through such experiences like this that it's not always that there's a lot of risk. when it comes to being willing to just jump into things, but there's also a lot of reward. And excitement and adventure and things that I missed out on as a kid. So like I was ready for it. And I was like, okay, yeah, we're gonna go out on the road, me and this dude. So the plan was that he was gonna come from Baltimore. We were gonna decide which one of our cars we were gonna use and leave the other one at my parents, and we were just gonna go out on the road and use our art and music and whatever physical skill trades we could learn and learn how to survive and just travel the United States. Um, it was extremely ambitious because we didn't have a full set. We didn't know what we were doing. At the same time, my parents were not expecting things to move that quickly. I had been talking to the dude for maybe 2 months by the time that he came out. They knew that he was coming out, but they were just not happy about it. And when he got there, they were very much like, we don't want anything to do with you. You're not going to be able to stay in the house because I'd wanted him to stay a couple days or maybe a week. And while we figured things out before we got on the road, and my parents were like, we don't want anything to do with this dude. So and they thought that was going to keep me, maybe send him back, and keep me there. But instead, I was like, fine, then I'll just move into the car right now and we'll figure it out right now. The thing about this dude was that by the time he came to pick me up, he was a different person than I had come to know him to be. In part, that was because he had been manipulative in order to gain access to me in the first place. But he had also chosen to drop acid for the first time with a random stripper that he met like maybe 4 days before he came to visit me or to come get me. And had trauma bonded with her during his trip. He was a bit psychotic. So like the trip fucked him up. And he trauma bonded with this girl, and he started coming up with all of these. He became immediately delusional. Now, the concept to begin with was already not fully logical, right? But he fell off his fucking rocker. And I even noticed within the couple days before he came, while we were talking, I was like, whoa, you're messed up. And he was like, well, he had dropped acid for the first time, and then they had smoked, I believe, sassafras the day afterwards, and that like just fucked his trip up, and like, or he wasn't able to process from his trip, and then that made him even worse. So like he was fucked up. He was fucked up by the time he came to see me. At the same time, after being with him for a year, I realized that he was probably kind of just fucked up to begin with. I was too. So when he showed up, and immediately at the second he got out of the car, I felt sick to my stomach. I got the grossest vibes. Gross, like I felt like that something's not right. This dude ain't right. This isn't good. This isn't a good situation. But I was stubborn. I had already given away all my things, sold all my things, made these plans to go on the road with him, let him drive all the way from fucking Baltimore to come pick me up in Wisconsin. And he was there now. So I was like, well, I'm going to just have to bite the bullet. I mean, that's what I did when I got married. I didn't want to get married by the time I got married, but I'd already made the plans. So I just went through with it. I was like, this is what I've set myself up for. So this is what I have to deal with. Making the most, right? I immediately knew that this wasn't going to be good, but I also still had that death wish. So I was like, it doesn't really matter what the fuck happens to me. I didn't care about myself. And this dude was preying on that. He was exploiting that as much as he possibly could. He could tell right off the bat I didn't care about myself, and used all of that to his full advantage. We ended up, so my parents were just like begging me not to go, and my mom was like, well, my grandma at the time, her mom was had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and within the matter of 4 months, I believe 4 to 6 months had passed. She passed very quickly, but it was during that process, things were super intense. She ended up having a foot uh, amputated, and was bedridden and was very sick. And um, as that was going on, my mom was having an extremely hard time coping with it. And so she was like, I can't handle not knowing where you are or knowing that you're out on the road while this is also going on. It's just too much. Like, you can't do this to me. And I was like, well, I can't handle anything right now, and I need to do this. I need to get out of here. So I was like, well, what if we just go and stay at his parents until, stuff kind of calms down, and until we have more money and more of a set plan and stuff, and then you can be more assured when I do go out, because I'm doing this one way or the other. We agreed that that was fine. I didn't go about any of this the right way. All of this was wrong. I should have just gone by myself, to be honest, but it is what it is. It is what it is, because this ended up being a life-changing experience, to say the least. So we ended up going back to Baltimore and staying with his parents.